Hi, everyone. Welcome to Human Rights Protocol Considerations Research Group. We're going to get going in just a minute or so. Why don't we go ahead and get started? I'm just waiting for one more presenter, but I'm sure she'll be here soon. But if anyone else who's planning on presenting or stepping up to the mic, if you want to test your audio, please do. I'll give it just one more minute.
Just having a check with the audio to see. This is Key here, by the way.
Sounds great.
Great, thanks.
Key, would you like me to present your slides for you, or would you like to control that?
Do it, if I can share my screen.
You can go ahead and test that if you'd like as well. You just have to request it. It's the sort of the middle button at the top.
I'll have a go here.
Okay.
And you guys can see that fine? Yeah, great. Okay.
Great, thanks so much. Good, so that's working. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the welcome slides, and then I think I'm troubleshooting with the other presenter right now, so we'll see where that turns out. Right, so thanks everyone so much for coming. Happy IETF 111. I need to reshare my screen, so bear with me. We may not meet for the entire time. It looks like we don't have as much, as many drafts discussion as we thought we might. So just a heads up on that. Sorry, Al, I'm not sure what happened. My screen share is not working. Let me try again. All right, wonderful. I'm monitoring the chat. So Joey's asking in the chat what drafts will be discussed today. So we have 2 current drafts in the research group right now, but they're kind of in various stages such that they haven't changed since the last meeting. So I think that might be the issue. But let me get to that in the agenda. Before we get started, could I just ask somebody to help me with notes? Because we've got Aubrey here. I'm really sad to say Aubrey's no longer my co-chair, but I'd love some help if folks, if anybody could jump on the pad. And if more than one person could do it, that's even better. Right. Okay, so this is the plan for today. We have, I'm hoping, I'm very, very sorry. We do only have one presentation. There's been a medical emergency with the other presenter, I've just found out. So Henriette Esterhuizen's not going to be able to make it tonight, and we're really, let's just, yeah. send good thoughts her way. It does not sound great. Then we will have Key Jeffries join us to give a talk. And then we'll have updates on drafts. If there are any, I can give you an overview of where I think the drafts of the research group are. I'm not sure if we have any of the authors in, aside from me. And then lastly, I wanted to talk just about the research group search for a replacement co-chair and other outreach. And then I think there's AOB. Would anybody like to propose any other business or changes to this agenda at this time? You can just put it in the chat or get on the mic. All right. We can also revisit that when we get to the end of the agenda to see how much time we have. So anyway, let's get into it then. So I want to draw your attention to the note well, which applies to the IRTF as well as it does the IETF, onto the main points around intellectual property, which at this point you may have seen already, and then in particular as well the privacy and code of conduct, noting in relation to this that we are recording these sessions and they will be going up on YouTube, so just realizing that. So we are part of the IRTF, the Internet Research Task Force. We're trying to look at longer term research issues related to the internet in parallel to the Internet Engineering Task Force. We're conducting research and we're not developing standards. In particular, we are looking for informational documents in Hrpc, although I guess we haven't yet looked at experimental documents. Just depends on what comes down the pike for us. So yeah, the Human Rights Protocol Considerations Research Group has been chartered to look at how internet protocols can either strengthen or threaten human rights and vice versa, as defined in both the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the ICCPR. You can learn more if you go to our website, hrpc.io. And so in our charter, we've got the objectives that we're trying to expose or at least raise awareness about the relationship between protocols and human rights. And we specifically are looking at the rights to freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. So you'll note that that is where a lot of our drafts are focused. And a lot of the discussion is focused. Our talks often touch on those main elements. We also have, we're attempting to propose guidelines to be as helpful as possible to those doing the work of creating protocols and setting standards as a human rights enabling environment. But also we imagine that there are threats to that. And so we also consider privacy implications such as those in RFC 6973. And yeah, we also do a lot of us involved in this research group are active elsewhere in other internet governance fora and so on, because we feel that there's a lot to do elsewhere to raise awareness about these issues. So we tend to do a lot in this research group that isn't not always internal to the IETF and IRTF community. So some of the outputs we've had in the past and are still working towards, we obviously do internet drafts. There are folks who've published on similar and tangential topics in policy and academic papers that are making these connections as well. It'd be great, just as a call out, maybe we can put this in the notes, for folks to share those papers more often in the list. I've noticed we've got kind of thin list traffic at the moment, whereas before I think we celebrated and discussed sources from elsewhere in the list more often. I can do a better job of that myself, of course. In the past, there was a film that folks made. There's been actual research done within the community about the community, so we could think about future efforts on that. And like if you came to our last session at 110, we also have been working on data analysis and visualization for network measurement, but also the way that the community communicates about these various things, and you'll have seen, and if you haven't, you can go on YouTube and watch it, Sebastian Benthal's Big Bang project. And then, yeah, from time to time, we use these guidelines and other things that we're developing to help actually analyze protocols or standards against their human rights impacts. So that's what Hrpc tries to put out. And here's some concrete milestones and things we've done. There may be some things we could add to this, but this slide has been this way for a long time. So we were chartered. We had the film. We have an RFC 8280 on research into human rights protocol considerations, which really lays the groundwork for future work, diving more deeply into some of those sections. Anyway, right now, as it stands, we have 2 active internet drafts. One is on freedom of association on the internet. And that one, as far as I know, hasn't changed much. We've had some list discussion. It's actually quite rather ready for, I think, last call. We'll see. We haven't dealt with that yet. And I don't believe Niels is here, and I haven't prepared slides on that. So because there have been no changes since the 7 version, so it may stay where it is. And then lastly, then we have the guidelines for human rights protocol considerations, which Gershabad has been writing, and that document as of the 110 session has been ready for last call. So let's move on to our speakers. Again, unfortunately, Henriette is unable to join us. She would have been presenting to us how to get involved in, or what the Internet Governance Forum does. I think there are many of us that, like I was saying before, do a lot outside of the IETF, IRTF, and the Internet Governance Forum is one of those key venues. So I'll just sort of summarize what her talk would have been about, and she's the chair of the multi-stakeholder advisory group of the IGF at the moment, and would have sort of given a talk to get us all up to speed on what the IGF is and how that might be a venue for future work or collaborative work, because the IGF meets annually, and its meeting will be in December in Poland. So we still have time. We might be able to get Henriette here in November at the 112 meeting to present a similar thing, but it just would be very short notice for folks that maybe get excited about it, want to get involved, and then have a month to plan travel, or not. It'll probably be virtual, if I'm honest. But then we do have Key Jeffries here. Key is the CTO of Oxen and the author of the Session Secure Messenger white paper. He's deeply experienced in cryptography and security design, and so we're going to have that talk start in just a moment. I think that's it. Let me just check the chat. There's been no action. So Key, if you want to go ahead, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. You can come on up.
Great. You guys can see me and hear me here?
Hear you.
Great. I'll share my screen as well. Hang on a second. Yep. I think I've lost my slides here though.
If you put them into full screen mode, you need to take them out of full screen mode and then re-request to show them, Lisa.
Yeah,
last time.
I'll just share this. Oh, and you guys can see the slides as well?
Yep.
Okay, great. So yeah, today I'm going to be talking about Session, which is a private messaging application, and I guess how that relates to some of the human rights considerations that were spoken about earlier. So yeah, as was mentioned before, I'm the CTO of Session, so I've been deeply involved in creating Session and kind of outlining some of the things that we've been thinking about over the course of the creation of Session as well. So yeah, I'll just jump into it. So the things I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to try and cover some of the key features of the Session protocol. So what it actually does, what the application provides to users, some information about the kind of low latency onion routing network that we've built, which provides kind of privacy to users, and some of the importance of how that relates to human rights defenders, and how we actually get privacy for users there. some technical challenges will be talked about, some other uses for the session protocol, and then I'll link off to the open source repositories that we have if you want to contribute code, or if you just want to have a look into what we've been doing over on GitHub. So yeah, and then we'll have a little Q&A if you want to ask any questions. So yeah, we'll just jump right into it. So when we think about designing for human rights at Session, we're trying to think about three kind of major things. So the three things that we think about is protecting the right to free speech, protecting censorship, and protecting the right to privacy. These kind of translate into the technical details of the protocol, but I think it's important to point out initially that for us, protecting the right to privacy actually offers some of the other rights underneath that. So if we don't know who the users are that are sending messages, or who they're sending messages to, or the contents in those messages that they're sending, then it follows on that we wouldn't be able to censor those messages because we don't actually know what they are or who they're being sent to. So protecting the right to privacy actually offers some of the rights underneath that, which would be preventing censorship and protecting the right to free speech. So for us, we really focus on protecting the right for privacy to privacy as the first kind of thing that we look at, and then other rights follow on from that. So what is the Session protocol, or what is Session? It's a messaging app. I don't know, I probably can show you my my desktop client here if you can see that. It's a messaging application, just like other messaging applications, that allows you to kind of connect with people all over the world. It's end-to-end encrypted. It has a onion router designed into it, so when you send messages, you're not directly exposing your IP address to any servers in the network, or the service that you are exposing your IP address to. It's only one of the servers instead of the actual server where you deposit your message. It's got a decentralized server infrastructure, so it's got a differentiating factor from something like Telegram or Signal, where there's either a centralized server or a group of servers run by a central entity that provide the messaging service. Instead, we have a network of 1,800 servers that can be run by different individuals, and it's anonymous sign up. So it doesn't require any mobile phone number, any email address, any kind of real world identifier that would connect you to your real world identity. It's all based on something called a session ID, which I can show you. Is right here. This is my session ID. So it's a string of numbers and letters that you can use to message anyone. Okay, so we'll jump on to the next slide. So yeah, as I spoke about before, anonymous signup is like probably one of the features that people talk about most with Session, and I think it's one of the ones that relates to human rights defenders the most as well. We'll often find in countries with very despotic regimes, or even countries that are, you know, like Australia, for example, to get a mobile phone number, you actually have to provide your passport or a driver's license or some sort of identifying information. So as soon as you have a messenger which requires you to use a phone number to sign up, that disconnects you from some of the anonymity that messages can provide. So the way that we do it is we just generate an MD5519 public private key pair on the device when the person starts the device, and that's a completely unique identifier for the user, but it can be instantly set up, and it's not connected to any real world identity that that user might have. We allow the user to back that up as well with the seed. So similar to if anyone's interacted with Bitcoin here, when you generate a wallet, you get a 25-word seed, and you can carry that around with you anywhere. That's the same in Session. So your messaging account is actually linked to your 25-word seed, and you can use that to move your account wherever you want. So even if I was to completely delete my Session client and all of the messages associated with it, I would still be able to grab that seed, go to another computer, input that seed, and I'd be able to get my identity back, which is, you know, essentially my public-private key pair. I might not have all of my messages, but you'll still be able to recover your identity with that seed. And obviously the other thing it gives you is a session ID, which is this long string down here of alphanumeric numbers and letters, which is your identity on the network and your public identifier that people can use to reach out to you and send you new messages. So end-to-end encryption, this is an obvious one for messengers, especially for us as well, because we don't have a kind of centralized server where all of the messages are held and there's some trusted entity that holds those messages. For us, we have a decentralized network, so it's important that the information that flows across that decentralized network is end-to-end encrypted so that the nodes that are dealing with that information can't actually, you know, inspect and see what's inside and see the messages that are flowing through the system. So for that, we use Libsodium. Our encryption protocol is like extremely simple. And most of that is related to the fact that we're a decentralized network, so we don't have some of the guarantees around delivery that networks like Signal or Telegram would have to build a more complex style ratcheting system where keys are constantly updated. So instead we fall back to kind of a simpler system that works better over a decentralized network. So yeah, it's stateless. It's extremely simple. It's just 2 calls to Libsodium, one for authentication, one for encryption, and it's suited for our network, but still provides the properties that you would want in an encryption protocol to be able to protect the authentication of the message and obviously the encryption, so that only the 2 devices that are involved in the conversation can read it, and they also know that they're talking to the person that they think they are. So yeah, decentralization, we spoke about that before. On the left here, you can see kind of a diagram of like a typical network, and that might be Telegram or Signal or WhatsApp, something like that. And then on the right, you can see a more decentralized network layout where the clients here, which are the smaller kind of dots that aren't outlined here, are connecting to servers. They might even be connecting to each other. This doesn't necessarily happen in session. Typically, it's a client-server layout. It's just that the servers themselves are decentralized. So there's actually 1,800 of those servers that are run by community participants mostly for a small cryptocurrency reward. And those are the nodes that actually store the messages in the system. And we have also a system of breaking up those session IDs that you saw earlier into different swarms, and swarms are basically like collections of nodes which are able to store your messages for you, ensuring redundancy in the network. And obviously the good thing about decentralization is there isn't a central point of failure. So in the centralized model, if I cut this server off, whether that be that service running in a country that doesn't like the messaging service, or the country that I'm in blocks the actual centralized server, then I can no longer access this. Whereas in the decentralized model, as long as I have access to one of these servers, I should be able to move through the network through that one server. So it's less central points and less of a honeypot also being created as well. If you spread the useful data of the network over hundreds of nodes instead of a single node, then it's a lot easier, or it's a lot more difficult for a passive kind of surveillance attack where you just, you know, sit here and look at all of the messages that are going through this node. Instead, you have to compromise a significant portion of the network to be able to do that here. I'm just gonna have a sip of water. So onion routing. Most of you probably would have heard about onion routing in the context of Tor, which is an onion router, but there's actually multiple onion routers out there that are deployed. You can look at something like IETF, but we have also developed our own kind of onion routing system, which uses that decentralized network of nodes that I was speaking about before. So essentially, it allows you to encrypt data for a destination where the destination is being wrapped in multiple layers of encryption and then being bounced through multiple nodes to ensure that your IP address is never exposed directly to the recipient of the message, or even directly to the server that's holding the message in this case. So yeah, this is important to protect against attacks where ISPs might see who you're directly connecting to, or the person who's storing or retrieving the message from the server that you put it on doesn't know your IP address directly with onion routing. And this is obviously just part of a bigger picture, which is minimizing the metadata in session. So your IP address is another piece of metadata that we try to remove from the system, as well as something like a real world identifier like a mobile phone number, which we also try to remove from the system as well. So yeah, there's some more information online about that, but I just assume that most of you understand what onion routing is, so we can skip through that. So I think one of the kind of biggest points that people fail to understand when they're trying to create new kind of novel messenger technology is that it does really need to focus on accessibility and usability, and that's something that we have really tried to design for over the course of creating sessions. Something that was really important to us originally was that we be open source, and we still are open source to this day, all of our repositories. And I think that that really kind of creates or breaks down the barrier to entry to contributing code to the repositories. So we're largely based in Australia and the US, and that gives us definitely a particular perspective on how messengers can be designed. But allowing the source code to be open source allows anyone from any cultural background to contribute to the source code and share their perspective about how they think a messenger should be designed. And that's obviously something that we take into account as well by reading through issues that people file with us, and just recommendations that people put out there in terms of how we should be designing our software. Localization has been a focus as well. So we've just started using Crowdin, which is a translation software which allows users to it allows them for a really user-friendly way to translate applications. So we've been doing that as well. I think Session's available in nearly 30 languages now. And something that we've also thought about, and these kind of 3 points grouped together, which is like emulating a popular application user experience, removing confusing options and simplicity, all of these kind of go together. And I think the main thing here is like, if you want your application, especially messaging applications, because they're built off this network effect, if you want it to be adopted, and it's a technical leap forward, it should still maintain the simplicity of some of the applications out there that billions of people use. For example, WhatsApp has a very nice user experience for most people. And tailoring a messaging application to be more like that while hiding all of the technical details about how it's good behind the scenes, I think has always been something that we've been thinking about. So if I pop up my little session client here, you can see like the only indication that I'm onion routing is this little like button here, which shows me like the different nodes that I'm being onion routed through here. But it's like hidden. You don't need to know anything to know that we're onion routing here particularly. You just need to turn on the client and it does all of that in the background. So yeah, really designing for simplicity so that people don't really need to know what's happening fully behind the scenes, but they're still getting that privacy in their conversations, or they're still getting that effective onion routing without necessarily needing to know what exactly it is. So yeah, some of the future challenges, I mean, there's been a lot of stuff like building a decentralized, onion routed, end-to-end encrypted messenger is a massive handful. There's a lot of stuff that we've been looking at here. So replacing onion requests with a stream-based onion router, this has been one of the biggest things. So right now, the protocol we use for essentially sending messages and making sure that they're onion routed is something called onion requests, and that's basically like a single shot request that's sent down. It doesn't allow for kind of stream-based protocols where we share video or we share voice calls, and that's something that we've wanted to add to Session for a long time, because we think it's pretty essential functionality to be able to voice call someone or to be able to have a video call with them, and to still provide that essential privacy where you're not leaking your IP address to the person that you're talking to as well. It would be very easy for us to put in like a peer-to-peer protocol where we just, you know, have peer-to-peer voice calling through WebRTC, or there's various other methods as well. But we really want to be able to provide voice calling while still onion routing the connection of the user, so that they're not revealing their IP address to the person that they're calling, which would happen with a peer-to-peer call. So yeah, we're looking at integrating LokiNet, which is another software that we've built into Session, which allows for unenrouted UDP streams. So that would allow us to do voice calling over an onion router. That's still in its initial development, and we're trying to look at whether WebRTC is going to work well with LokiNet right now. That's one of the investigations that we're looking into. I think usability enhancers, as I spoke about before, accessibility or usability is like a very important thing, and we still don't have stickers and Reacts, and the performance of Session is maybe slower than a lot of the existing kind of applications out there like WhatsApp or Telegram. So really working on that usability front, I think, is super important and something that we're trying to look at, and a problem that we're trying to solve as well, just by throwing developer resources at it basically right now. And yeah, technical testing and feedback is another thing that's really, it's been hard as well, because the ethos of the project is really to collect as minimal data from users as possible. And when you start putting things inside of the application which are tracking how users use the application to provide them a better experience, that's obviously violating some of your core ethos. So we've really tried to move towards like a voluntary interaction with the user, so that, you know, if they want to give us extra data about their use, or if they want to reach out to us and file an issue, or if we can provide them some way, or if we can survey them some way in the application, but always having voluntary interactions with the user to make sure that they're okay sharing this data with us, so that we can improve the experience with the application. So that's something that we've really started focusing on over the last probably couple months or something. Just trying to get feedback about which parts of the application people use, which parts they want improved, and yeah. So there is naturally some other uses for the Session protocol as well, stuff that we haven't necessarily looked into that much, but things that you could naturally think about Session being used for. So because you don't need an email address or a mobile phone number, it has this kind of instant onboarding experience, because you can just have the user generate an NT5519 public key, and they can just start sending messages into the network. So that could provide a really good experience if you wanted to provide someone some sort of temporary identifier that they're only going to use for the day and then just throw away. Or at this point also connects as well if you wanted to have some sort of second factor authentication where they get a unique public key that's provided to them, and then they can receive messages back and forth from a central service. And you can also think about having that be an anonymous file transfer system as well, because as we spoke about before, your session ID is kind of an identifier in a decentralized network. And if we add in the LokiNet aspect of things where we can have a stream-based protocol, then that'll essentially allow someone to be addressed on a decentralized network, and then we can use LokiNet to share files between those individuals. And yeah, from some of those primitives, you can kind of build out and see how that would work in a system that you're building. Or yeah, it's a very kind of up to you type situation once you've got those primitives. So yeah, I would encourage, I think that's nearly the end of my talk. Yeah, I think I'm in Q&A now. So yeah, I would encourage people to reach out, message me on Session. That's my Session ID. Oh, we've lost the slide there. Reach out to me on Session. That's my Session ID there. It's also, you won't be able to write that down. So if you go to I have Twitter as well. If you just look up Key Jeffries, I've got a GitHub profile. My Session ID is on there as well. And if you want to check out some of the open source stuff we're working on, including Session, you can go to the Oxen.io repository on GitHub. So yeah, I think that's it for the presentation.
Keith, that was really interesting. I wonder if folks wanted to queue up and ask any questions. Otherwise, I might have some. I mean, I guess my first question is, we have folks participating in the IETF that make secure messaging apps. Some of them are talking about that in messaging layer security working group, and there. So I just wonder, if you wanted to elaborate on or talk about why you think your approach maybe is more aligned with human rights goals than some of the others out there, if at all.
Yeah, I think it's big. I think it's because we take that point of being really privacy or anonymity focused. Actually, there's a lot of messages that are privacy focused that encrypt your messages, like Signal or Wire, and I know that they're working on the MLS stuff as well, which I've looked into too. But I think we're taking a pretty hardline approach on not having any real world identifiers in the application. Which I think lends it much more to kind of a human rights defender's approach, because you could see people in countries that, have despotic regimes, and they really don't want to be using their mobile phone number or their email address to sign up to messaging applications, because they might not want that real world link to their physical identity. If that comes out that they're using one of these messaging applications, or if some of the contents is found out of what they've been messaging about, then that can often lead to consequences, via the regime. So yeah, we're really focusing on that anonymity aspect and still providing the privacy and security side as well. But I think that's where it really leads into.
I'm not sure if you can see the chat, or Antoine, if you want to go ahead and get on mic, but I think you're raising an important point.
So the question was...
Yes. In fact, I have some doubts regarding the anonymity of your system, because in your presentation, you mentioned that when you install the session application, you generate a public-private key pair, and then you use the public key as your identity on the network. Then at the end of the presentation, you say, oh, and by the way, you can reach me with this session ID because I'm always available. So in fact, how difficult would it be for someone willing to attack your anonymity to get this session ID and say, oh, this is the guy that I've seen presenting at IETF? So actually, I think that from an anonymity perspective, the fact that the identifier is stable over time is a threat, because you can if you have a network of people that use the same identifier to contact you, then how difficult would it be for an attacker to determine that the person that is connected to this and this and this person is you, because you are the only contact that is common to all those people. So in fact, I think that there is a threat with regards to anonymity with your use of the session ID, and the fact that it's not human readable doesn't mean it's not anonymous. It is anonymous.
Yeah, I understand your perspective there. One of the major things that makes session ID different from a mobile phone number is that they can be destroyed and recreated kind of instantly. So if you want to completely disconnect from your identifier, that my session ID is what I displayed before, then I can just dispose of this account and create a new one, or create multiple accounts that are disconnected from each other. So if I want to have a public identifier which is displayed on the internet, which is this one, and then I also want to have another account that's completely disconnected from my ID, I can create those accounts just ephemerally, like I can create them instantly. Another thing that we are looking at as well is having some kind of anonymity in the delivery of messages as well, so that people can send out messages more, I don't know if you're familiar with BitMessage, but more BitMessage style, where the network, the message is flooded to the entire network, so they don't necessarily have a destination on the message per se. But yeah, I mean, really, you need some way to identify everyone in a messaging system, and having a long-term identifier rather than a short-term identifier that changes over time means that people can take choice into their own hands about how they control who knows them and who doesn't with their session ID. So that's really the thought process that goes into that.
On the last point, regarding how you manage your identity and maybe how you have multiple session IDs, I agree with you that it can help in managing in improving the anonymity in a way. So I didn't get the part where you could destroy your identity, and maybe you could have some things like you create multiple identities and you have a way to create them for a certain period of time, and you have a covering period for the two identities, and a messaging way for people to say, oh, this identity swaps to this one in a sort of secure way, so as to preserve the fact that people are reachable for a longer period of time than the duration of your session ID.
Yeah, so that's something that we want to work on as well, is kind of multi-session ID support in a single account. So having someone kind of in a single client being able to have multiple session IDs in that client, just so it's easy for them to manage their multiple identities. So, and they're able to generate identities ephemerally as well. If they just want to have a conversation with someone that they don't really know very well, then they can generate a new session ID and have those messages still filter into the same client. So that's been something that we've been working on as well. So yeah, definitely understanding the issue that you're bringing up here as well there. And I see in the chat also some people talking about Zuko's triangle and how do you kind of exchange the session IDs. So we also have another system that I didn't really get to talk about today, which is similar to the Ethereum name system or something like Namecoin, where you can actually map on the blockchain a human readable name to a session ID. Obviously, that would be removing some of the anonymity from the system. If you wanted to map your real world identity to the session ID, that's completely optional. But yeah, we do have a way to map human readable names onto onto these names using the blockchain that we've created.
Yeah, happy if folks, again, want to jump on the mic with their questions. My last one was, you mentioned in one of your slides about your process for feedback, user feedback, and it's something I'm particularly interested in as a researcher, like how to really create a tight feedback loop. Even design. So in spoiler alert, in the 112 session of Hrpc, we're going to have a speaker who's quite well known for their development of the participatory design methodology. And I just wondered if you had any insights or any innovation around how you actually receive feedback from your users and implement features, and if you face particular challenges with that. I just finished reading a book, well, it's been a couple months now, about when open source projects become very popular, it very swiftly becomes an issue of not enough people telling you how to make your product better, but way too many PRs and way too much, and managing that whole feedback loop can be challenging. So I wonder where your session protocol and you all are at with respect to your practices around user feedback.
I don't think we have anything particularly innovative here. Perhaps mainly we manage things through GitHub PRs and issues that people file on our repositories. Perhaps like the only unique way we have of getting feedback is through session itself. So the session developers hang out in channels on session where people can provide us feedback, and we obviously take those things back to GitHub and file them as issues. But we don't have some kind of new and amazing technology for managing issues. I think it's just it's a hard slog. Like, we take feedback from users and try and improve on the application every day. So yeah.
I think Britta has a particularly good point in the chat if you wanted to get to that, or Britta, if you want to come on mic, it's a good one.
I'm reading that now. So basically like authentication issues. Because anyone can create a public key, you don't know who anyone is. I'm guessing that's the kind of gist of the question, and that maybe harks back to the web of trust stuff as well. I think it really does come back to that. Like, because of the anonymity aspects of the application, we can't say that users are who they say they are, so they have to establish trust with each other out of band. We can't, it's hard to have your cake and eat it too here as well, right? Like, if you want anonymity, necessarily you need people disconnected from their real world identifiers. And if they want to bring that back in, like if they want to connect themselves to their identity again, then they can do that. But that's an optional thing that we put up to the user. Just like I showed you my session ID before, you know, that's disconnecting me from some of the anonymity I get because I'm connecting myself to that session ID. But if I didn't want to do that, I wouldn't have to. And I could generate also new session IDs to interact with different groups of people.
Jeffrey, you're not sending audio, but you can go ahead if you want to.
It seems like, similarly to Zuko's triangle, there are desirable aspects of systems like this where we can't get all of them at once. And I've heard some criticism of your system where, like, the identities are not kind of verifiable because you've picked goals that don't include verifiable identities, that include more anonymity. And it would be nice, kind of in this research group or in kind of the private messaging system, if we had, I guess, terminology to say like which goals the system is trying to achieve, so that we don't try to criticize systems based on goals that they're not even trying to achieve.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, we've definitely tried to focus more on the providing anonymity to users rather than providing kind of verifiability around who that user is, I guess. Yeah, as I spoke about before, you can link your real world identity to a session ID, but it's always going to be, that system's always going to be out of band in terms of what we can provide. There's no kind of central identifier in the network which says, you know, this person is who they claim they are.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, Key. Really appreciate you coming. I think it's really early in your morning, so more appreciated. Although it could have been worse, it could be on Europe time for you. That wouldn't work out very well. So yeah, thanks so much for coming. It's a good discussion. It was nice to sort of have an additional, another messaging app in the ecosystem talk about the alignment with human rights, because I do think that these sorts of things are quite aligned with what we're trying to do in Hrpc. So stick around if you want. We're going to move into the next portion of the agenda. Again, very, very sorry that Henriette isn't here to present, but we will go ahead then, and if you can see my screen, yep. I'm going to give you a really quick overview of our drafts so that folks know where we're at with this, as far as I know. And I'm also happy, I think, Colin, you're still here. If I'm wrong about these things, please jump in. But I know for sure Niels, who's the lead author on Draft Association, isn't here. And I also do not see Gershabad, who's the lead author on guidelines. So yeah, so starting from the top, so freedom of association on the internet, you could read that real quick, but the high points are that we have done a thorough literature review. We have from that generated sub-questions, which then were turned into, essentially each sub-question became its own section. that looked at cases about freedom of association online and in with as it relates to IETF or IRTF related work and protocols. And that's more or less, I think, quite sorted. We had a presentation about it at 1:10, and it seemed like it was in a good place. We had some text changes. We had some on list debate following that meeting, and I think it's in a stable place, but it hasn't progressed past that. So I would have liked perhaps to have talked about draft association at this meeting to see whether or not it was ready for last call, but I think we'll have to save that for 1:12, or we could do it on the list. If other people have different views of draft association, have read it recently, please chime in, but my guess is that because it hasn't changed, you haven't done that. So yeah, draft guidelines then. That is the one that at 1:10 we decided was ready for last call. We went through the process of doing the last call on the list. Gershbad came up with a final version based on comments, and it is ready to progress into publication. So I guess that's where I'm wondering if Colin, if you're still here, if you had any updates or questions from, I'm not one of the co-authors of draft guidelines, but I could do my best to capture any concerns or thoughts you have in the notes and then go to the list to action anything.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, perfectly.
Yes, good. I will try to be coherent at whatever.
It is very late for you.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I still have to give a detailed review of this draft. I was reading it briefly, I guess over the weekend. I think it's certainly going in the right direction. I think there's a lot of good points here. I had perhaps some concerns that it was a little one-sided in places, and sort of presented with you one particular view, and that there could be counter arguments made as to the benefits and reasons for doing certain things. So I think it's certainly raising a lot of good points to think about. It's perhaps, I think it could perhaps be clearer in some of the trade-offs and things to discuss around the trade-offs. So, because all of these things are, of course, trade-offs.
Indeed. I think that's the point, right? Is that there's been a lot of discussion, especially in the recent version changes around, like, just being able to say that something is maybe controversial or there are trade-offs here, but then doing our best actually, because we are trying to come down on the side of human rights, to make a determination one way or another, but not to be prescriptive or demanding, but to bring that forward so that there's just an awareness for developers and engineers that this indeed is a trade-off that maybe sometimes remains buried unless you confront it. So that's fair enough. Yeah.
Highlight the reasons why one might want to do an approach you might want versus why there might be other approaches which are attractive for other reasons, and make people aware what they're trading off for this.
Indeed. And one thing I think we can help with, and maybe as you're reviewing it with somewhat fresh eyes, Colin, you can think about is how we could give language to draft writers when that happens, when they come across a sort of trade-off and they've decided to take one approach over another, to capture that either in a human rights consideration section or elsewhere in the draft, such that it's not that they've swept it under the rug, it has been considered, but then, you have to make a decision one way or another. So that could be something that I think this draft is meant to offer. And so determining whether or not that happens would be useful.
I think that makes sense, yeah. And I mean, the comment earlier of being able to know what the goals of a system are and what it's supposed to be providing. Yeah, so you know what feature, what guarantees it's supposed to provide are useful.
I really like that point of Jeffrey's. It was in the last talk, but yeah, I like that thought where it's, we've had this discussion. It's been a decision. What's the best way to document that in the RFC series when that has come up? It also, I think, will shortcut a lot of the discussions, maybe when it feels like a draft is in its late stages, but then there's this remaining human rights concern. If it's well documented in the draft, then we don't have to, make a big deal about it. It would be good to get better at documenting those things. So I think that should be one of the goals of the final review, is to make sure that that is clear and that folks developing drafts know what to do. Okay, very good. Thanks, Colin. While I have you here, well, I don't know if you have comments on this, but actually I wanted to go back for a second to draft association, because I did just remember one of the things that has us a bit stuck on this is that as the only chair of HRPC at the moment, I'm also a co-author on draft association. So we were really hoping that we could find a document shepherd or someone else who could help the draft come to completion, because I feel like there's not maybe a conflict of interest, but just an interest. I don't know if it's a conflict or not, but yeah, I'm not going to be the best document shepherd for that draft because I helped write it. So if there's somebody,
I mean, this is the reason we have multiple chairs usually.
Yeah, right, exactly. And we did have, but then we're in a situation now where it would be really lovely if someone who's got experience and a stake in HRPC document success to jump in and help shepherd it. We've reached out to some individuals to ask them directly, and folks are really busy, but that's a general call that we can capture on the notes and reiterate to the list that we're hoping for either a new co-chair, which is the next and maybe final point on the agenda, or a document shepherd for draft association to get that moving forward again.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so as promised, moving then to the last agenda item, which is just around, needing to do additional outreach for a co-chair for HRPC. I think that I have some thoughts on maybe how to present it, very much based on our slides and our website and things that we've done in the past around promoting HRPC's work to folks outside of the IETF, IRTF community, to help potentially get folks in academia maybe interested in joining HRPC and co-chairing. But this is actually sort of like an open mic portion where folks could offer up suggestions or an ask that you contact either me or Colin or both offline with your thoughts about who we might be able to approach. But just in general, that yes, there's an active search out there for a co-chair of the research group. Colin, I don't know if you want to add anything, but just want to make that point super clear to people.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have too much to add. But as you said earlier, thank you very much to Avery for all the effort she put in over the years with co-chairing this group. It's a shame to lose her as a co-chair. We are looking for a new co-chair for the group. Certainly from my point of view, I think it would be I think it would offer perhaps an interesting perspective if we had chairs with different backgrounds in different aspects of human rights. An academic co-chair would perhaps be a good choice. Possibly someone from industry to balance out the different perspectives might help. Having a balance of interest in the chairs might help ensure that the group continues to have a balance of interests going forward. But yeah, if people are interested in the role or want more information on what it's about, as Mallory said, talk to Mallory or talk to myself, and I will. Hopefully we'll have some good candidates, and I'll be able to make a decision hopefully before too long.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, I think that is good. We definitely want to balance. We want to potentially even get fresh perspectives. One of the things that, in addition to the many years that Aubrey spent working hard on HRPC, one was always just innovating and thinking around like how to do more outside of the RFC series, which I really appreciated. And I know we have a lot of participants in this research group that publish outside of the IETF, IRTF. They're either in academic journals or elsewhere. And I think that aspiration to do more with that is really something we should hold on to, because I do think that we do want to attract folks into this community, but I think we also want to recognize that we are within a larger ecosystem of folks who are researching this and talking about this question. We just so happen to be very close in proximity to, engineers and designers that are really developing these protocols. So that's the sort of like special thing about HRPC. But then, yeah, leveraging that larger ecosystem and the innovation around publishing is something that I think we could really lean into more. So just to reiterate, like Colin said, we want to get complementary co-chairs. I hail from civil society. I've only worked for nonprofits my entire career. So anyone outside of that, it's really, there's so many other sectors out there. It'd be great to have some other ideas or other thoughts. Also, yeah, again, just differences in research as well. One thing that's interesting and unique about HRPC is that we don't just it's not just very hard technical stuff. Obviously, we're dealing with social issues as well. So sociologists and others, I think the skill set can be quite diverse. Okay, so any other thoughts? Folks want to come to the mic. We are only halfway through our time, but again, that is because we have sort of unavailability of current draft authors to give any updates, and also then Henriette's unfortunate inability to present today. So I could give you an hour back. You can go to other sessions in this block, but I'm happy to wait another beat to see if folks want to come to the mic and add anything. Okay. Well, I think that's it then. I won't take up any more of your time. I just really want to thank you all for coming. Thanks so much to Key for the presentation. Thanks to Colin and Aubrey. Special thanks to Aubrey. Miss you already, Aubrey. All right, everybody. Thanks, and have a good rest of your day. Good evening. Bye for now. See you at 1:12.